Mireille, everyone. I'm so happy and honored to be here with you all today with this incredible panel. I want to start off by kind of grounding us again after our break. And one of the things we've really been talking about, I think, this week is our connection with the natural world, with our plant relatives and our animal relatives. So I wanted to sing for you a lullaby, a Kauai and Serrano lullaby that was taught to me. It's also a dragonfly song. And it's really, I think, a beautiful example of this more than human relationship. It's a sound that the dragonflies like to hear. So the word for dragonfly in the Kuya language is quinyinyi. And this song kind of represents this really ancient long-term relationship of calling the dragonflies. And if your heart is good and your heart is calm and you have that inner peace, the thought is that if you sing it, the dragonflies will come to you. And I've seen it happen, so it does call them. So I'm just going to sing a little bit of the lullaby, and you can close your eyes or ground yourself, and then we'll get started. Ushkana, ushkana, oh, ushkana, ush. Ushkana, 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 ush. Ushkana, 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 ush. Achama, thank you. So I hope we're feeling a little grounded. And I would like to start by asking our panelists to introduce themselves. Anything you would like to share, anything that's on your heart, and anything about your work as well.
Opantoish, Aniko, Kimasa Hilik Susu Mehe. So I said, hello, relatives, how are you? I'm happy that we're all together in this way. My name's Dionne Hoaglin, and I'm a part of the Coast Miwok Tribal Council of Marin, and also the organization, our nonprofit, Hukuiku Incorporated, which is based here in Marin County. And again, it's always a pleasure to be here, on ancestral land, the land of my mother and my grandma's on my maternal side. And so the work that I am a part of is really about wellness and leadership, and I'm working a lot with our Indigenous youth and giving them opportunities to actually fulfill, who they were intended to be in every aspect. And again, supporting and creating those spaces where they can thrive. So I'll start with that. Thank you.
Buju and Dinawe Mainganug, Gizi God, Renda, Dionne, Madrigal, and Dishnakas, Ashwewin, Indigo, Anishinaabe, Chippewa, Wabazation, Dodom, Misquedesi, Waju, and Dunjba. Hello, all my relatives. I'm Turtle Mountain Chippewa, and it's an honor to be here today, and with gratitude for Spirit Rock and for Braided Wisdom and Carol Cano, who really brought me here. Honor and gratitude to be on a panel with Indigenous people, and to be with all of you who are doing such important work to help the earth and the future generations. And so with gratitude, so I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, and I'm an author, and I love writing actually fiction about Indigenous female superheroes who save the world. And I do, my work really centers around stories as medicine, and I use mindfulness and somatic experiencing, narrative, story, all through an Indigenous lens. And I love stories. And when I say stories, I'm talking about story with an Indigenous lens, the way that Native storyteller Leslie Marmon-Silko talks when she says, "Let me tell you something about stories. They aren't just entertainment. Don't be fooled. They're all we have, you see, to fight off illness and death." The way Native storyteller N. Scott Momaday talks when he says, "Anything is bearable if you can make a story out of it." And the way Native poet Joy Harjo talks when she says, "I can hear the sizzle of newborn stars and know anything of meaning." Of the fierce magic emerging here, I am witness to flexible eternity, the evolving past, and I know we will live forever as breath or dust in the face of stars. So stories hold our hopes and our grief, our vengeance. They are portals to other dimensions, holding all that is possible and all that is impossible. Indigenous stories contain the essence of our ancestors and the ancient Manitus, the spirits, the mysteries of the land speak through the stories. They contain the moral center of the world. They're a compass of how to be a human being in relationship, and they contain power and magic, and with magic, anything is possible, anything can be overcome. And so with story medicine, I'm talking about tapping into sort of this tribal mytho-ecological knowledge. And that's this kind of cumulative knowledge that's born from an intimate long-term interaction with both the environment and the unseen energies that surround us. It encompasses not only an understanding of the natural world, but a profound connection to the cosmos, a connection that includes the Manitus, the spirits, the mysteries that inhabit and animate our world, the land. They're woven into the very fabric of the world. So that is story from an Indigenous perspective. And together, it forms a living framework for how to understand and interact with the world, how to manage the unfathomable, how to live in balance and beauty and peace upon the land and with each other. So imagine a world where Indigenous stories aren't just preserved, but they're actively utilized to help us in this journey, in this fight that we face to guide us in the world today. That's the world that we're working to create and that we have lived in. And Jack Kornfield asked about that question, what excites you? And so that's what excites me. And Jane Fonda talked about, kind of knocking down those pillars. And there's also pillars that we need to build. And so building that story medicine pillar is the pillar that I focus on in my work. Thank you.
Tihei mauri ora, māku e mihi atu ki te asua, ko ia te kaihanga o ngā mea katoa. Ki ngā hunga mate, haere atu rā. Ki ngā hunga ora e hui mai nei tēnā rā tātou katoa. Māku e mihi atu ki te tangata whenua o enei whenua. Tēnā koe, ka nui aku mihi ki a koutou katoa. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou katoa. Kia ora and hello, everyone. My name is Amelia Butler, and I am an Indigenous Māori woman all the way from Aotearoa, New Zealand. And it is my great privilege to be here today with you all. I started speaking in my Indigenous language, Te Reo Māori, and it's been so beautiful hearing all of our beautiful Indigenous languages already today. The first thing I acknowledged was Great Spirit, the Creator, universe, however you refer to that higher power as being the one that created us all. I then acknowledged our Sky Father, Rangi Nui, and our Earth Mother, Papa Tuanuku. I went on to acknowledge all of our tupuna, our ancestors who are with us and guiding us on this earthly journey. And I acknowledged all of you, everyone here gathered here today. A special acknowledgement to the Coast Miwok tribe, to Dionne and his iwi, his nation. It's just such a great privilege to be here on your lands, and for me, being a guest here on these lands on Turtle Island. So acknowledging my Indigenous brothers and sisters here in the audience today, and a big acknowledgement to you all. So my work here on Turtle Island, it revolves around sharing my culture through teaching my Indigenous language, sharing our traditional performing arts, our kapahaka, and also teaching our culture as a Māori cultural practitioner. One of our most popular or most well-known dances is the haka, which I'm sure you might have seen on the internet. It's gone viral a few times, and so that's my work. I travel around Turtle Island and teach. Currently, I live on the lands of the Chickasaw Nation in Memphis, Tennessee. A big ngā mihi nui. Thank you so much to Braided Wisdom, to Carol, for having me come out here and being a part of this amazing retreat over the last few days. Kia ora.
Miigwech Achima for all of your introductions, and for Dean as well for welcoming us all here on Monday. Thank you. I think what's so awesome about this panel is there's like multiple generations represented between all four of us even. And we've been talking a lot about that intergenerational knowledge transmission and ancestral wisdom. So I wanted to ask you all how you connect with the stories and spirits of the lands that you come from. I think as Indigenous peoples, we all have our own unique stories and prophecies, but there's often a common thread that connects us, and a common way of seeing the world, and this idea of interrelatedness and connection. And I was wondering if you could share how you're retracing the steps of your ancestors or bringing that wisdom into your life today.
Yes, that's a good one. That's a good question. I think, again, I always go back to, there's like original instructions, that we were given, our ancestors were given, and how to live in this world. And a lot of it is based on, values, principles, and right relations. And it also speaks to, again, our relationship with the natural world. And for us, we're water people. So water is kind of like that first teacher, that first life source. But even with that, I think there's also reminders, there's stories, from our elders. And I was fortunate to receive those. And I was told many years ago that everything that not only myself, but others, in our tribal and Indigenous communities, we were gifted by the Creator with everything we ever needed, to live a good life. But a lot of times, what happens is, because of the impact of colonization, we lost those teachings along that journey, and for several different reasons, factors. But a lot of times our relatives look outside of themselves for the answers and how to, how to be in good relation. And so it's one of my roles and responsibilities, especially for the young ones, to share those teachings with them, and they're, everything that they ever needed, like I said, is within us. It's within us. And then again, there's that awareness, because I say, like culture is one thing that has enabled us to actually be here in this time, in spite of whatever, the impacts of colonization were. I believe in that, and I think it aligns with, what our ancestors prayed for us. And we are the living prayers of our ancestors. And that's something that, again, that we are, it's our obligation to, pass that on to the future generations. And so, just by me being here, my work's not done. And I still have work to do. And so I have a lot of gratitude with that, and so, and again, I'm not alone. I'm not alone. I walk with those teachings. I walk living those teachings with my ancestors, and so, those are my first thoughts on that question. So again, culture plays a big part of it, but thank you.
So this makes me think about Anishinaabe prophecy. So we have a seventh fires prophecy, and within that prophecy, we believe that we are at the time of the seventh fire, and it's a time of choice. And Indigenous people all over the world really do ceremonies, and in a way, they all have their own beliefs and own prophecies, but they're all working to keep that seventh fire going, to keep that portal open, so that the world can go in a good way. And the prophecy started long ago. Some say it started during an eclipse, a great eclipse. And the Anishinaabe people lived at that time lived on the northeast part of this continent, so Maine up into Canada. And they were told that they needed to leave their homelands and go west, or no one would survive. So almost all of them left. There was one band that stayed, and they traveled west towards Montreal was the first stop. The complete migration took 500 years and went up into the Great Lakes areas where most of the Ojibwe, Chippewa people live. And so in the prophecy, it was told that a light-skinned race would come, and that at that time there would be a choice, that they could join together and create a beautiful world together. But if it didn't go that way, it would go towards a path of great suffering and destruction, and they would be a people that seemed to not be able to learn. And now, at this time of the seventh fire, a choice arises again, and that portal opens, and we can make a choice again to create a beautiful world, and then the eighth fire can be lit. If we don't make that choice, then it leads to destruction and suffering in a much larger way. So understanding that, part of the prophecy is retracing the path of our ancestors. And so in some of the work I do, this is a book I just finished writing called Silenced. I was retracing some of the paths of my ancestors on my mother's side back in Scotland and Ireland. And there is she's sometimes referred to as the goddess of all goddesses, older even than Celtic mythology, the Kayabera. And she formed the lands of Scotland and Ireland with a hammer. And what she cares about most is the land and the animals. And she's a very strong woman. I'm working on a second story right now called Shingabus, and part of it is I am going back to all the points on the Great Migration journey that we did and connecting with the land and the stories in those places. And so one of them happens to be at Niagara Falls and not far from where the Haudenosaunee people live, and specifically an incredible peacemaker, Oren Lyons, and who's Onondaga. And so I met with him, and he asked me, this was a couple of years ago when Biden was still president, and he said, well, if you could go and talk to Biden, what would you say? And I said, I would tell him to go learn his stories. He's Irish. The Kayabera is in his ancestral line. And if we would follow the wisdom in those teachings, love for the animals, the land, respect for women, the world would be a lot better. In doing the migration journey, I was out in Ontario, Canada, this past June, and sort of north of Michigan, Sault Ste. Marie, and I went to this place called Agawa Rock. It's a sort of rugged, not far, but rugged terrain. You go down, and there's a steep cliff face on Lake Superior with pictographs that our ancestors, Anishinaabe ancestors, drew long ago. Their teachings, their messages for us, and they drew them in red ochre, mixing it with different things so that it would last on rock that doesn't erode easily, because these messages are also for us today. And Lake Superior is a pretty powerful lake. Can be dangerous. And so you're not really supposed to go out there unless the lake is calm, and Lake Superior is never calm. And but luckily it was the calmest it can be, I suppose, on the day that we went out there. And so I guess the question, like connecting, how do you connect? So connecting to those places, and you get dreams and visions. And there was an image on the rock that of a Manitou, a mystery being that I had dreamed about several years before, that I had never, I didn't know about. I didn't know the story, but it was there. And so these messages come in different ways. And I think that colonization has limited ways of knowing to sort of, there's this one way, There's many ways of knowing, and we need to be able to utilize all of them. And so there's petroglyphs and pictograms all over Ontario on the Canadian Shield, and that our ancestors have left. Sometimes medicine people will go out and they'll pray for people. They'll put a teaching on the rock or a prayer. And one of the things that on this last journey that I learned when I went out there is one of the prayers they'll often ask for is like for you to have a long and happy life. And that's an asking, an intention. You could say, I think about, there's a mentor of mine, Dr. Greg Cajete, he's Tiwa Pueblo, so wise. And he talks about education as a journey to become a complete human being. And it always starts with an asking, and asking is like a prayer. It's like something that helps perfect your aim so you know where you're going on the journey. So this idea of to live a long and happy life, if that's the asking, then what do we do to prepare ourselves and align ourselves for that quest? And I think I'll stop there for this question.
The idea of stories that you were talking about, it made me think about something we have in my culture, which is called pepeha, and it's the way we introduce ourselves in Māori culture. And so I'd love to introduce myself from a Māori cultural perspective now. Ko Huruiki te maunga, my mountain is Huruiki. Ko Punuruku te awa, my river is Punuruku. Ko Mātātua te waka, my ancestral canoe is called the Mātātua. Ko Ngāti Wai te iwi, one of my tribes is Ngāti Wai. Ko Moderator Kaikaupeka Piripi te tupuna, my ancestor is Moderator Kaikaupeka Piripi, and he was the paramount chief of our tribe, Ngāti Wai. Ko Moko o Whangaruru te marae, my gathering place. If anyone's ever been to Aotearoa, New Zealand, it's in the far north, so past Whangarei, in a very small rural community. That's where my ancestral lands are, called Moko. And it's very close to the moana, to the ocean, and it's beautiful. So if you ever get a chance, it's an amazing place to visit. And lastly, ko Amelia Butler aho. My name is Amelia. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou katoa. Therefore, greetings, greetings, greetings to you all. And so this idea that we have in our culture of pepeha is that it positions us, it situates us to the lands where we're from, to these key elements, our mountain, our river, to our ancestral canoe. And these are the canoes that our ancestors came from other areas of the Pacific Ocean all the way to Aotearoa, New Zealand. And so as Māori, we all whakapapa, we all connect genealogically back to one of these 9 great canoes that came all the way from the Pacific Ocean, from different islands to Aotearoa, New Zealand. And so this is the story that we tell about our identity, about who we are from a te ao Māori or a Māori cultural perspective. And so, you know, for what we've been talking about over the last few days, it made me think, you know, what are your stories? What are your ancestral mountains? What rivers and what bodies of water do you connect to? If you are from these lands, you're Indigenous to these lands, then you're from here. If you're not Indigenous to these lands, where did your ancestors come from and how did they come here? And so just thinking about these questions as a way to not only create our own story, but to ground ourselves in an Indigenous way of thinking. Because when we start thinking about, and we say in Māori, ko wai tō maunga, when I ask someone, who is your mountain? Or ko wai tō awa, who is your river? We start to automatically ground into that connection that we have as Indigenous peoples, where we are one with nature. We're not just part of nature, we are nature, and there is no hierarchy. There is just us being one with nature. There's not that separateness. And so I'm intentionally saying, who is your mountain instead of what is your mountain? Because already that creates that shift in thinking from a Western colonial context of that separation to an Indigenous context. Who is your mountain? Because for us as Māori and as Indigenous people, the mountains are our ancestors. We tell stories about them, great stories. We have there's mountains in Aotearoa, New Zealand. There's love stories, and then one mountain gets between the other mountain, and this mountain ends up going off with that mountain. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that explains like also the geographical location of these mountains. Like, why is that mountain there and that mountain there? Or for a river, there's a fork in the river. And our stories, they explain why there is a fork in the river. And they also will tell us things like not only the values of our culture, but share caution. It's like maybe at high tide, you shouldn't go down there because, you know, the water comes really high. And so I think it's through these stories that we can really find this connection not only to our indigeneity and our identity, but connecting us to our non-human relatives, to the sky, to the earth, to the trees, to our animals, into all things, and to our ancestors as well in the spiritual realm. And so I think thinking of it from these perspectives, shifting the way of thinking from a more Western colonial context to an Indigenous context, and asking that who. So for us as Māori, I mentioned earlier, so our Sky Father, Rangi Nui, and our Earth Mother, Papa Tuanuku, as Māori, we see them as our primeval parents. And so that we actually all descend from the union between Sky Father and Earth Mother. And so our creation or our origin story is about the earth and the sky, the being in a tight embrace, Rangi Nui and Papa Tuanuku, and they were pushed apart by their children. And so their children are all the many atua, the many gods and goddesses of the environment. So for example, we have Tangaroa, who is the god of the ocean, and Hine Moana Nui, who's the goddess of the ocean. And so of course we always have that divine feminine and divine masculine, because that's what creates life. And so they were pushed apart by their children into the world we live in today, with the sky above and the earth below. And so as Māori, we literally see ourselves, many of us as Indigenous people see ourselves as literally coming from the earth, and that the mountains are our ancestors, Mother Earth is our mother, the sky is our father, and we are all connected, we are all as one. And then for us as Māori, we see people who are not Māori, we just see those who are not Māori as just another tribe that also come from the union between our Earth Mother and our Sky Father. And so that goes back into that Indigenous way of thinking that we are all one, we are all connected, we are nature, and there is no separation. Kia ora.
That's so beautiful. And I think, this kind of colonial, colonized way of seeing ourselves as separate is so lonely. And it's so isolating. And it's so wonderful to be able to think back to our ancestors and our stories as being the way that they're connecting to us, speaking to us, and the care that they took to live their lives for us 7 generations in the future, I think is something that's so beautiful, especially with the visioning practice we did earlier today. Thank you for sharing about your creation story. And I want to give Dionne or Renda an opportunity to talk about if there's a moment from your creation story or a bit of it that you think is really speaking to you or resonating to you now. Because I think our creation stories often hold the answer for the problems that we're facing today. It's really good to go back to the beginning, and there's so many different seeds of wisdom that we can find. So do either of you feel called to share something about that?
Well, I think, again, it's important, with those stories, what they do for us, again, is to help us, kind of acknowledge where our place is. And again, what we have relationship with. And what our medicine is. I should say plural, medicines are. And it starts as a reminder for us, we come from the water. We come from that big water. And, it's kind of, it's a reminder and an acknowledgement also that, how we are born into this world. There's that spiritual aspect, but there's also the human experience of being born from our mothers, from that water from within the womb of our mothers. And that is a ceremony. And believe it or not, we had this ceremony here, even in our part of tribal renewal ceremony of the sweat lodge, of the Anipi. And that, a big part of that is again, the idea that we go back into the womb of the mother, and that we're doing that renewal, we're reborn, and recognizing again, the sacredness of who we are and how we heal ourselves, to acknowledge that, to accept that, and to live in that way, to I guess you can say walk in that way of acknowledging that we are sacred beings. And I think that there's a teacher that goes in our creation stories for us is Oye, which is coyote. I don't know, in a lot of indigenous traditions and communities, that coyote was served a great purpose as far as, they call him the trickster, but how I was told about coyote, he's that that elder relative. He's that teacher. He's that guide. But he's going to test you. And there's lessons that he's going to guide us through. Because in this journey that we're all a part of, that's kind of like how we grow, by the lessons that we go through. And so I appreciate, again, how, again, in creation, it shows us where all of our medicines are located, aside, along with that water. And I mentioned where my grandmother's village is, right over the hill in Ekatamal. And our village, and it may seem like it's kind of secluded, but actually there's a water source that goes along our village. And that's genius of my ancestors, right? They knew that. They knew that what the importance of water and their relationship to it. And so again, my medicine in relation to like I talked about, the original instructions is, the movement, the dance that aligns with my prayers. I still can dance, by the way, but I'm transitioning to be a singer. And but again, I didn't really realize it, but there's so many of my younger relatives that shared with me, and they still share with me, I want to be a dancer because you shared that way. I want to live that, be that prayer. And so I didn't even know that that's what, again, by sharing my medicine, that was the, I guess you can say, the blessing of, again, when we talk about what are we doing for, looking at 7 generations ahead. Because traditional way is, we should always think that, be forward thinking. What am I doing today that is going to benefit those future generations? And I see it happening. I see it happening with the younger relatives. So I thank Oye, my great teacher, out of that creation, in guiding me, and of course my ancestors and all my relatives that taught me about those stories.
So creation story. so that asking that the blessing of may we live long and happy lives, if that's our aim, then how do we live? And I think there's answers in our creation stories, and in the Anishinaabe story, Kichimanitu, the great mystery, had a vision. He had a dream. And when I say he, in our language, it's not really gendered. It's just difficult to translate in English. And in this dream, Kichimanitu saw like all the mountains and the valleys and the prairies and the forests and the lakes and the rivers and the oceans. And Kichimanitu saw the bears and the eagles and the caterpillars and the otters and the turkey vultures. He saw the cedar and the birch and the willow and the oak and the elderberry and the sage and the sweetgrass and the strawberries. And Kichimanitu saw Sky Woman and Winter Maker and Nanabuju, the Manitus, the spirit mysteries. And he felt every emotion. And in everything, he saw the beauty. And so Kichimanitu created the air and the water and the fire and the earth. And he breathed into each of these things in essence, into everything an essence, into each of us an essence, something that is very unique about us and is really connected to purpose and what we're meant to do and how we're meant to walk in this world. And Kichimanitu gave another gift, and that was like deep inside us, put a power, a type of power, an ability to be able to manifest that essence, something that you have to really dig deep for. And so we all have this purpose, and we're different. It's not all the same, but it's finding that thing about us and getting in alignment with it. And sometimes I think of purpose isn't like, okay, I know the end goal of it. It's kind of a way of walking in the world, and a way of being. And so to live long and healthy lives and to ensure that for the seventh generations, it's important for all of us to find that thing and to dig deep and have the power to manifest that so that we can bloom into who we are. And then that gives us joy, and it also helps the world and the people around us when we're all doing who we're supposed to be. And so I think that's how I would answer that. And I just want to add on Vine Deloria Jr. The world is alive with spirit, and our connection to it is what makes us human. And I wanted to say this too. So I didn't know Joanna Macy, but I've learned about her through those of you who have talked about her and know her. And so I think this is the thing, this purpose that I heard somebody say, I think the first night, she would ask, what's your gift to bring to the world? Go and do that. So I think it aligns with her. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for all three of you for sharing, the creation stories and the bits of wisdom that we can think about for how we're going to go forth in the world and live our lives. And what that message is going to be. I would love to ask each of you how you cultivate reciprocal relationships with plant and animal relatives, because I think that's something so important with our human ancestors. We have this great connection, and then how are we also interacting with the other beings on this planet? And I'll pass it to you, Dean.
Whoa. Again, I mean, every day, I mean, it's like we have the choice, right? How and where we're going to be, how we're going to be, where we're going to be. And, you know, I don't have to really think too much about it because of my understanding of the beauty and the blessing and the, you know, the healing of our plant relatives. And I shared this a little bit in discussions we had previously. You know, there's a reason why the Creator put the plant relatives here on Earth before us, right? They were put here. It was designed that way because they were going to help us. They were going to be there, you know, to kind of like bail us out, you know, when we struggled, when we got out of alignment, you know. And I want to just share this personal story because there's so many, and my sister shared about all those beautiful medicines, right? The cedar, you know, the sweetgrass, you know, tobacco. And one of our local plants is angelica root, and also what we call bahem, which is, some people know it as the bay tree, but we know it as pepperwood. And that's a very powerful medicine. And so during the time of the pandemic, I could say that correctly. What I did was, you know, I know I'm thankful for Western medicine, but there's traditional medicine too, you know, with our plant relatives. And what I did was I went and gathered some of those traditional medicines, and I offered them to all of our elders. You know, at the time they would do like drive-ups, right? Drive-throughs, like, yeah, going to, what's that place, In and Out or something like that. But, you know, I wanted to like offer that, and they were like so happy because, and again, those plant relatives have the properties to heal, like because what was COVID? You know, when we talk about like respiratory, you know, those medicines like the cedar and, you know, help with, you know, strengthen our immune systems. You know, it has those properties, right? And so. Again, just I have that understanding and that awareness. If I feel stressed out, it's so easy for me to go to, you know, go out and connect, you know, and stand connected to this earth, and you know, kind of like that. That is so powerful. That is so rejuvenating, you know, in every sense. You know, we live in a different time where most of the time this is a nice place, by the way. Most of the time we're indoors. And so it's so easy to connect to our plant relatives. They're out there. They're wanting us to have that relationship, right? And when we speak to them, when we speak with them, you know, there's this, again, we call it reciprocal relationship, you know, that helps us, again, come back into balance, to be in alignment. So, you know, again, it's a conscious choice, you know, in taking that time, right, to, you know, have that relationship. So, and yeah, I think that's where like I share with our youth, that's where the miracles happen. So thank you.
Yeah, I love, again, being on a panel with my Indigenous brothers and sisters. And so we didn't really plan what we were going to say, but I have a similar thing came to my mind about humility. Like, how do you approach with humility? And so we have something called the 7 grandfather teachings that teach us how to live well if we want to live these happy lives. And Dibas and Dizawin is humility, and this idea that that Dean talked about, that we are taught that we weren't here first, that there were the plants and there were the animals, and they were fine without us, but we can't survive without them. And that really helps us to know our place. And this idea of humility is that, to understand that we're a sacred part of creation, and we are not over any other being. And we are also not under any other being. So it's a very strong kind of humility. And okay, so I'm really glad I got to weave this in. Okay, this is a turkey feather. And I was co-teaching a retreat with Carol and Amana in the spring on grief, but I wasn't able to be here, so I was on the screen. And I was leading something with people to go out and connect with something in the land. And I shared that, when I was there, I always really connect with the turkey. And like I've seen them in the past, they're like with all their feathers out and just kind of strutting around so proud, like great posture, like so proud. And so a couple of years ago, I there was a feather in the parking lot, and so I asked if I could take it and offered something. And I use it sometimes when I'm talking. Okay, I've got to get in that posture, and I've got to, thinking about that turkey. So when I got here, so at that retreat where I was on the screen, I was talking about that, and I couldn't see it, but they told me afterwards that, as I was talking about and telling the story of the majestic turkey being, the turkey had come to the window and was like looking in about it. So when I got here this time, I go to my quarters, and this is like on the dirt next to my door. Somebody has left this. There was actually 2 of them. And 3 altogether, but 2 that looked just like this. And then I was out walking, and there were some turkey vultures in the parking lot, and they were quite aggressive. And I actually, this is a couple days ago, I started getting a little bit worried, and I thought, ooh, they were being aggressive. What kind of sign is that? So I decided I need to look at what is the turkey to my people, and the turkey vulture specifically. And I find the story about one of our beloved Nana Buju, back in the day, long ago, like turkey vulture had these beautiful feathers. I mean, they were the most beautiful of all, and turkey vulture would really strut them around and like wanted compliments from everyone all the time. And so one day, our beloved Nana Buju, part human, part spirit, is out, and he sees turkey vulture coming, and he's like, no. And he's like, but there's nowhere he can hide. Anyway, he ends up setting a trap for turkey vulture, and turkey vulture gets caught, puts his head in a crack, and it gets stuck there. And he's trying to pull it out. And by the time he finally pulls it out, all the feathers are gone, and his head's just red and wrinkly. And that's turkey vulture to this day. But meaning-wise, turkey vulture, it makes so much sense that they're here. So they're a lot about purification, healing, and renewal. They clean up the dead carcasses, right, and then take them into the sky to fly. So they're sort of this messenger between the physical and the spiritual realm, and about purifying and renewing. So I wanted to share that. Thank you.
Okay, there we go. So in the work I do as a Māori cultural practitioner, one of the frameworks that I use is this idea that everyone is Indigenous. It's just that some of us have to go much, 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 much further back in our genealogy than others. And so coming from that standpoint that everyone is Indigenous, again, so I'm just needing to go much, 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 farther back in their genealogy to where their ancestors were living these earth-based rituals, connecting with the land, living according to the seasons and the moon cycles. If we're coming from that perspective, if we all think about our ancestors all had the ability to talk to animals. They would all commune with the trees and talk to the trees. And, a lot of our Indigenous ancestors and even a lot of our Indigenous people today, they have these abilities. And so I think part of that is what's happened with colonization and, the whole thing, the Western culture, is that we... in our language, we call it a whati, and it's when something breaks. And so we had a whati where our relationship with nature, there was a break, right? And so the animals and the birds and the trees, they never stopped talking to us. We stopped talking to them. And so part of our work now, of all of our work, is to reconnect, reclaim, re-indigenize, and recreate these relationships. And so I always use this word in my work. I always talk about a reconnection or a re-indigenization, because as Indigenous people, we're always coming from this idea of, the 7 generations back, 7 generations forward, and in my language we call it whakapapa. And so this genealogical standpoint that everything exists on this matrix of whakapapa, and that takes us all the way back to the beginnings of the universe, and that's our creation story, Ranginui and Papa Tuanuku, and then all the way forward, right, into the future, that's all of our descendants. And so then if we're thinking about, like somewhere in your lineage, you had ancestors who could talk to these animals, to the birds, who would commune with the water, and had these connections with these elemental beings. So, not just our animals and our plants, but also, the elements, the air, the sun, the wind, the rain, all of these are elemental beings. And so I think if we're thinking from it from that perspective, the idea is to reconnect to, our non-human relatives. And that in the reconnect or in re-indigenization is that we're reconnecting from the sense that someone in our lineage was able to do that, or many people in our lineage, and then we lost it and we're coming back to it. So maybe it's, just for you, it's your lifetime, but again, the way we're thinking is like on the greater scheme of things. So all the way back through your lineage. All right. So that's the reconnection. All right. So what I was taught is in order to reconnect with our non-human relatives is that it's on us here to reestablish those relationships. And so what I was taught is whenever I see a bird, I will greet the bird. And I will greet the bird in my native language. I will say kia ora. But if you don't know any native language or you don't speak your ancestral language, you can just say hello or hi, however it is. Because if you think about it, if you're walking down the street and you see someone walking towards you, you might look at them and you might say, hi, how are you? And, and then you continue walking. Now, if you saw that same person every day, you're walking every day and it's the same person every day, you start to build a relationship with that person, right? So this is no different from our tree family, all of our animals, all of our plants. There's no difference there. So it's all about building that relationship. And so I believe that part of our task is to build the relationship, and we have to be the ones to do that, because they didn't stop talking to us, we stopped talking to them. All right. So I live on the lands of the Chickasaw Nation, and once I was walking in one of the beautiful parks over there in Memphis, Tennessee, and I came across this big flock of Canadian geese. And as I was walking towards them, I kind of froze. I stopped in my footsteps, and I was like, oh no. I do not know how to say hello to these geese in a language that they would understand. And so my best hello to them was saying it in my language, kia ora. And so while they would have been a bit more familiar with, kia ora, then maybe a hello, I still thought, no, that's not, I need to do more. And so I do have 2 children, and of course they're Māori, but they're also Blackfoot and Choctaw. And so I ended up enrolling in a Choctaw language course. And so I did this course, and then I came back to this flock of Canadian geese. And I was so happy because I could finally say hello to them in a language that they would understand. And I said, halito, which is hello in the Choctaw language. And so, that's how it looked like for me as a, Māori cultural practitioner here on my Indigenous brothers and sisters' lands. It may look very different from you, but my encouragement to you all is, say hello to that tree, build that relationship with that tree or that bird or that river, because, it's really on us we have to go the most of the way now, probably all the way, to be honest. To reconnect with our non-human relatives. So, and there's some beautiful trees here as well. And a part of it too is once you build that relationship, like anyone, if you have like a very close friend or a best friend or a very close family member, once you build that relationship, then, there's things that would happen within the context of that relationship that you wouldn't even imagine. And, I've built relationships with the trees near where I live, and it's really been amazing. And I'm really privileged with this work I do, sharing the culture. And I not only do prayers and things for, people, but it extends out to, all of nature. And so I have been very privileged to have requests from trees to be prayed for and things like that. And how that looks like to me. So again, once you build that relationship, it can look very many different ways. But how that looks like to me is I was walking in the park and I had my glasses, just my sunglasses on the top of my head, and a tree knocked off my sunglasses. And so straight away, that's my tohu. That's my sign. I'm like, okay, this tree wants a karakia, a prayer. And so then I do a prayer for the karakia. Or if the tree drops water on me, I'm like, I see that as an equivalent of someone tapping you on the shoulder saying, oh, excuse me, they're dropping water on me. I'm like, okay, karakia. Or they brush their branch against me, karakia. And so it's all just down to that framework, right? How you're interpreting it. And if you're seeing nature as just, you're one with nature as our ancestors and our kin, our non-human relatives, then you're going to interact with them just as you would a person. And so in my culture, there's no difference from when I'm asking someone, who is your mother or who is your mountain? Linguistically, ko waito maunga, who is your mountain? Ko waito mama, who is your mother? So linguistically, there's not a difference. That's because there's not a difference. We don't have a difference from our te ao Māori cultural context. Just something to think about. And then I did want to take this opportunity to do a karakia, which is a traditional Māori prayer. This one, it will ground us into our Earth Mother, Papa Tuanuku, and our Sky Father, Ranginui. So if you are able to, if you're on a seat, you can place your feet flat on the ground. So we're grounding into our Earth Mother. I know she has many, many different beautiful names, grounding into our Earth Mother. And then you're welcome to close your eyes and to take this moment to reconnect with not only our Earth Mother, but with all our human and non-human relatives, all of our siblings. Ko te reo o ngā manu tērā, ka tangina I te ao. Kua uru ko te rā, ki waenga nui, ia rangi nui, ia papatua nuku. Ko rangi nui ki ringa, ko papatua nuku ki raro. Ka heke iho ko ngā roimata ia rangi nui. Ka hiki ake ko te kohu ia papatua nuku. Ko te tohu te rā, ka orotawa I te ao, I te pō. Tūturu whakamaua ki a tīna, tīna. Haumi e hui e tai ki e. Pō e tangi ana tama ki te kai. Mana waiho me tiki ake ki te paua haukai. Hei a mai te pakake ki utara. Hei wai umo tama ki a homai. E tō tipuna e ue nuku whakarongo ko te kumara. Ko pare nui te rā, ka hiki mata te tapu ai o tangaroa. Ka whai mata te tapu ai o tangaroa, tangaroa. Ka haururu. Kia ora. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. I know we got a bit of a late start, so before we end, I wanted to ask if you all wanted to share final reflections. I originally had a trickster question here, and because I think tricksters are so important. They have this incredible duality. They can change and adapt, and they're one of our biggest teachers, I think, as Dean mentioned. And so you already kind of touched on this, but we can, because it's a trickster question, let's go in the opposite direction. End with Dean, whose homelands we are on. And if you want to close us out, Dean, that would be awesome. So we'll pass it back to you and then go this way.
No, in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we actually don't have any big, large land mammals. So we're an island. So we have insects and we have butterflies and we have birds and we have lizards and we have all the sea creatures, but we have no buffalo or coyote or bear. So the trickster question for me. We do have Maui, who is a demigod. I'm sure some of you have seen the Disney movie Moana. That is definitely one interpretation of our culture. But it's, it's one framework there. But so Maui is, we have a lot of different stories around Maui that's throughout the Pacific Ocean region, throughout Polynesia. And with the stories about Maui, what's really cool is that this idea of being a trickster is really seen as like a really great quality. Like it allows them to do all sorts of things. So our fire goddess, her name is Mahuika. And so for us, fire is the personification of a female deity. And so Mahuika, she has like fire for her hair, her fingernails are fire, so she's all fire, but she's also the auntie of Maui. And the story of Maui and Mahuika and how fire comes to our people, it happens through a series of tricks that Maui does to his auntie, where she's giving him her fire fingernails to take back to the village. But he loses one, or then he drops one, and he has to keep going back and going back and going back. And then at the end of the story, I think the fire ends up being saved in a certain native tree that we have in New Zealand. And so it's that tree, the wood of that tree, that can be used to create fire. And so that's a very brief version of the story, but I would say, in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and throughout the Pacific Ocean region, Oceania, Polynesia, Maui is our like trickster character. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to do coyote, and I know there's coyote around here, and so there's this is from up in Canada, First Nations people doing some teachings around something called two-eyed seeing, and it's this idea they're using within the health field that it's sort of these equal eyes. One eye is the Indigenous lens, and the other eye is the Western science lens, and having them work together. And I did a decade probably of work with sort of culturally tailoring evidence-based family strengthening programs. And I always found that sort of that Western eye was always dominating, like even when we were trying to not have it do that. And so I think the story of the coyote's eyes actually comes from Warm Springs in Oregon. So basically there's a rabbit medicine doctor, and coyote sees him one day, and he's throwing his eyes, and they go off onto this tree. And then rabbit calls them back, and coyote thinks this is a wonderful trick, and he wants to learn it. And so he asks rabbit, who says no, and coyote just keeps asking, like 4 times he asks. And on the 5th time, rabbit finally says, fine, I will teach you. But you can never do this more than 4 times in a day, or something terrible will happen. And so coyote's like, fine, just teach me. So he teaches him, and coyote's practicing it, and rabbit goes off into another story. And coyote's done it about 4 times, and he says, like, why am I just doing this here alone where no one can see me and admire this? So he goes and finds some people, and he's like, I'm going to do it again. And so he throws the eyes off, and then he calls them back, and they don't come. And he's like, come back, hurry up, hurry. They don't come. And crow flies by, sees the eyes on the tree branch, grabs them, eats them, and flies away. So now coyote's really upset. I mean, crying, pitiful me is something like his song goes. And this little mouse comes along, and with great compassion, mouse sees coyote suffering, and he's like, well, I'll give you one of my eyes. I have 2. And so he gives him an eye, and Mouse's eye is quite small, and it only lets in a little bit of light. So Coyote takes it, but he really can't see much at all with it. So he starts going into his I'm pitiful, cry. And Buffalo comes along, and Buffalo takes compassion on Coyote's suffering and says, well, I'll give you one of my eyes. And Buffalo's eye's big. I mean, it won't even really fit in Coyote's socket, but Coyote's trying, and half of it's falling over on his cheek. And so he's got this little eye and this big eye, and he's trying to see, and he starts getting a headache. And he gets really upset because Buffalo's eye is letting all this light in that it's blinding. And so Coyote just throws away the eyes, but before he does that, he actually sees this woman, and she's an older woman coming over a hill, and she's got this big basket on her back of berries. And Coyote says, hey, do you see that, wait, I missed a part of the story. Okay. So Coyote's upset. He's thrown away the 2 mouse and buffalo eyes. And then he decides to ask his sisters, which he calls his sisters the huckleberries that are in his stomach. So they come out, and so the huckleberries are there, and they're tired of helping Coyote get out of problems. They're like, we're not helping you. And Coyote starts singing, hey-oh, hey-ho-ho, hey-oh, ha-ha-ha. And it starts hailing. Coyote's calling down hail, and it's hitting the branches and the leaves of the bush, and they don't like it. And they're like, fine, just stop. Okay, we'll help you. You need to find the flower for your eyes. It's a daisy. In fact, it's called Coyote's daisy or Coyote's flower. And so Coyote finds it, and he puts them on. He can see, and he's quite happy. And he sees, and then the sun starts to go down, and as the flowers can do, they close up. So then he can't see at night, and he's very upset about this. So the next day, his eyes open again, and that's when he sees the woman. She's coming down the hill. She's got a basket on her back, and it's full of berries. And he says, do you see that bird behind the tree over there? And she's like, this is a prairie. There is no tree over there. And he says, I mean, over the mountain, there's a tree and there's a bird. And she's like, you can see that far? And he's like, yeah, I can even see all the way to your house, and I can see what your husband's doing. And she's like, I want those eyes. And he's like, I'll trade you. And so she trades him. So now he has the human eyes, and she gets the flowers. The sun goes down. She finds that he's tricked her. She's very mad. And that's how the story ends. But I'm working with a First Nations community they did a bunch of focus groups in First Nations communities after COVID health disparities. And we're working to put the data into a play that's now going to be an animation that gets performed as a report for the Canada CDC instead of a paper report. And so we're using the story in the play. And so at the end of it, we revisit, like, Coyote comes back, but what happens is that the rabbit comes and he gives Coyote back his eyes. And that we really need to see with our own eyes. And this is what Amelia was talking about. Like, we all have these indigenous roots. And I think part of that problem with the two-eyed seeing that I certainly found in the work I do is that the Western eye can't be the colonized Western eye. It's got to be a land-connected, knowing where you come from, indigenous eye, and that the way forward is really through that indigenous lens. Thank you.
Man, how do I top that? Let's see, Jumping Mouse.
Jumping mouse.
It made me think about Jumping Mouse, and when he lost his eyes, and but he became that flying eagle. It's too long of a story, so I can't tell. But I just want to share this too, just this thought that again, my sister just mentioned. So important, to have those eyes, indigenous, ways, because again, I guess Eurocentric and Western medicine lack one thing, and that is humility. And that's what you find in the way we see things and the way we live things, right? And included in that is, again, compassion for all of creation, right? And like I shared earlier, if you don't know how to nurture, then you'll probably learn how to fear. And so we need to change that. Come back to, again, indigenous way.
I know we started with a song. If you wouldn't mind closing us out.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and close this out. And again, I want to thank, again, my relatives up here, and it's been my honor to, be with you all in this way. So, again, always, when I share a song, it's just like our songs are our prayers, but I want you to, as I sing this song, go ahead and, think about what your intentions are, what your prayer is, what you are seeking, in this journey you're on. And again, it's not the destination, it is the journey. And so I'm just learning how to be a sanger. So have pity on me. Willie, 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 Willie. Willie, 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 Willie. Oh, hey, hey, hey. Oh. Blessings, relatives.